Okay, this video is called Part 13 from the book review about British imagination. And this will be Part 2 of Eugenics, Eugenics in the USA. So the gist of it is that the ideas from Charles Darwin and Francis Galton of eugenics were taken up by American scientists and psychologists, especially psychologists, and they developed a mental scale for brain damage or for stupidity. So basically a moron was somebody who they said had an IQ of 50 to 70. Mental retardation has been defined as 70 or less. Okay, borderline mental retard, 70 to 80. Below average cognitive function, IQ 80 to 90. Okay, so they said that somebody who was a moron, that was a higher level of mental retardation, could do some type of simple work. A high-grade imbecile could do some manual work. A medium imbecile could barely do any manual work. And a low-grade imbecile, the simplest work. And an idiot was even lower than an imbecile or a moron, could barely just keep himself alive and feed himself with help. Anyways, I show you this. Stanford Binet is the IQ test, originally in France and stuff, and then made available to the English language. Okay, here's a big dog in eugenics in the United States. Charles Davenport, graduate of Harvard, psychologist, became a pioneer in the USA eugenics movement, director of Cold Springs Harbor Laboratory, founder of the Eugenics Record Office, where they would map out people's family trees and their diseases, their behavior problems, their intellectual achievements, kind of like what Facebook is today. They made their own eugenics records. And basically, if you had in your family an alcoholic, like for example, one of my aunts was an alcoholic, my mother was a hyper-emotional Puerto Rican, my father was Ireland, considered inferior people. So who knows? They might have sterilized my mom mandatorily. I would never have been born. By definition, I should be a degenerate idiot. So, anyways, we will continue. That was Charles Davenport was big, pushing for more and more eugenics. The United States had a whole eugenics society. They would have national meetings. Lots of people would attend. It was considered a trendy thing, and the Protestants are worried about the degradation of American society, so they wanted to purify American society. Puritan, by the way, many of them are Puritan descent, was to purify Christianity from Catholicism. Henry Goddard was another psychologist, and it also kind of tells you a little bit of what I think of psychology. Another pioneer in eugenics, and they're doing IQ testing on lots of people. And then here was a sort of a famous example. This lady is Carrie Buck. They felt her mother was an idiot, and that she had gotten pregnant out of wedlock when she was a teenager, which was seen as her being immoral. Then she was forced to undergo mandatory sterilization. It was a pretty famous case. The Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes said, that her mother and I guess her grandmother or something were considered stupid imbeciles. And he said 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. She should be mandatorily sterilized. And they did a mandatory sterilizations on a lot of people. This is the United States of America, because everybody says, in Germany in 1930s, they did these terrible things. They got the idea from England and from the USA. Here's a 1907 Indiana eugenics law. By the late 1800s, they felt that criminality, alcoholism, pauperism, just being poor, mental problems were hereditary, and they had mandatory sterilizations. Okay? All right, and just for IQ, all kinds of stuff comes out of IQ, and a lot of it's pretty ridiculous. So here is estimating average IQ by college major. And I think it's funny because when you look at these things, you can guess who wrote them. So they're claiming the average economics major has an IQ of 122, higher than the average chemistry major. No way, Jose. I do believe that public school teachers have very low IQ, so I'm not surprised by that one. They put them as 105. I thought that was kind of funny. They say the average graduate from college major in physics has an IQ of about 133. The other thing is you can have differential on math IQ, because I remember when I was in high school, there were some guys who had scored really high on mathematics on the SAT, but did crappy on the verbal. And I think some people are like that. I know they're like that because I've met them. Okay, we'll come back to that in a moment. Here is Margaret Sanger. And she was a giant proponent of, birth control and whatever could be done, abortion. One thing funny about this picture is, don't take my word for it, just ask yourself. Doesn't she totally look like the Wicked Witch in the movie The Wizard of Oz? Okay. Margaret Sanger went all around the USA promoting eugenics, birth control, all of this stuff. And then she founded Planned Parenthood. She was still considered a hero by the Democratic Party. They would give Margaret Sanger awards, okay? And so they wanted, this is a way to make women more promiscuous too. You give them birth control and there's no consequences for their action. But also Planned Parenthood for abortions too, to even make that stronger. Okay, this is just some comparison of IQ by country. And all these Asian countries have really high IQs. Asians are famous for being really good at mathematics. The USA math team has got lots of Asians. Other people counteract that and say, well, their math IQ is higher than their verbal IQ. And that's why they don't have that many comedians. Now, I don't know for sure if that's true. I'm not an expert on IQ testing, but that's what some people say. Okay, now here are some estimates of IQ with regard to profession. So they're saying that a normal IQ is about 100. If you're above one standard deviation, if you're over 115, 15 is a standard deviation for IQ. So 116 means you're at least one standard deviation above. If you're over 130, then you're at least two standard deviation above. And so they're claiming that most PhDs have IQs of 130 or higher. Okay, and they're saying that puts you in the 98th percentile in the population. And then they're saying the average PhD in physics has an IQ of 143, and they're saying that puts you in the top 1% intellectually of the population. The average IQ of a Nobel Prize, according to this article actually came from the New York Times with regard, it was called Can You Make Yourself Smarter from 2012. And then they said the average IQ for a Nobel Prize winner, and there's a lot of different types of Nobel Prize winners. The ones in science are, I'm sure, higher than they are for a lot of other categories where they just make up the category. And they kind of make up the science rewards too, who makes money for corporations. But anyways, they're claiming that it was people with IQs average of 158 for Nobel Prize winners, okay, and that's 1 in 10,000 in the population. And then they're claiming that some of these other geniuses had IQs of 164 or higher, people like Mozart or the chess champion Bobby Fischer. So again, I don't know if that's true. These are all just totally estimated things. There's no real science behind this. Okay. Now here's something that I actually thought was good. Now this guy Thorndike, he wasn't the only guy. There were a bunch of other people who said, instead of just emphasizing eugenics, controlled by birth, eu means good, genics means birth. So that eugenics means good births, only have good people born, so to speak. He emphasized euthenics. So eu means good, thenics means environment. So what he said is we should be doing things to improve people's intelligence based on improving their environment and their education. And I would agree with that, because eugenics is just something theoretical for the future, whereas euthenics is something right now to help people who are alive. And what we're actually seeing is the opposite. We're seeing dysthenics. The environment is being destroyed to damage people. And it's so obvious. Look at your tap water. Tap water in most cities in the Western world, there's fluoride in the water. That's a brain neurotoxin known to lower IQ. There's aluminum in the tap water. That's a brain neurotoxin that lowers IQ. Glyphosate is a brain neurotoxin, excitotoxin. It's also increases risk of fatty liver, leaky gut. Atrazine, strongly estrogenic, mitochondrial inhibitor. These are things that are just in tap water. Other estrogenic chemicals, plastic materials, and other toxins. So our tap water is designed to lower IQ. So that's a dysthenic system designed to lower people's intelligence. The public schools are designed to lower IQ. Allowing children to have cell phones lowers their IQ. So basically, eugenics was very popular in the United States, and you had these, scientific journals called Eugenics, like Eugenics Quarterly, okay? And then as the idea of eugenics became less and less popular, they just changed the name of the journal. Instead of calling it Eugenics Quarterly, they called it Social Biology, okay? So what I'm trying to say is, England is the one who led the charge, thinking they're superior to everybody else in the world, and then USA took them up on it. and they were sort of the Protestant continuation of England, and that's where eugenics comes from. And then people say, well, oh, it died out, like this being changed. No, no, no. In the next lecture, I'm going to show you how the eugenics movement is actually very strong, and it is continuing. And if you don't think it's going to have a big effect on the world, then you don't know what's going on. I'll discuss that in the next lecture. I hope you find this helpful and interesting.